Welcome to On Track, the Oz Resistant Network's weekly news roundup. I'm your host, Bill Bibbulmun. Now, what do the Keystone cops in the wild west of WA do when they want to arrest a CPO? Well, they park the wagons in the circle, of course. Take a look at this. Officer CPO, not wearing his name badge. Play a game of pass the bolt cutter. Officer Ingram, Officer Meat Cow, no trespass notice, no Crown warrant, no entry. Officer CPO, not wearing his name badge. Right, well, that was the so-called WA Police, or Waypole trading as WA Police Corporation, continuing their frame-up on champion whistleblower Robert Paul CPO, and that was a raid they carried out on his private residence without a Crown warrant on the 25th of July, the evening of the 25th of July 2013, following which a number of fraudulent documents were created by some of the officers you've just viewed in that little film clip. That was the so-called WA Police, or Waypole trading as WA Police Corporation, continuing their frame-up on champion whistleblower Robert Paul CPO, and that was a raid they carried out on his private residence without a Crown warrant on the 25th of July, the evening of the 25th of July 2013, following which a number of fraudulent documents were created by some of the officers you've just viewed in that little film clip. Now, we mentioned last week on Track that Robert Paul CPO was facing two trumped up charges in the Perth Magistrates Court last Thursday, and this is what unfolded as I went in and with the crowd of supporters and watched the corporation at work. Now, when Robert Paul offered his birth certificate up to the Deputy Chief Magistrate, proving that his name is Robert Paul and nothing else, no capitalisation of any surname, no slave trade going on here. Of course, the Deputy Chief Magistrate refused to hear it and started hurling some insults at him. So he was forced under duress to play along with their little corporate game. Now here's the documents that these coppers fabricated in order to create a charge of breach of bail. But just firstly, they didn't use the fake charge of breach of bail to gain entry to the house and make the arrest, because they knew the arrest warrant was fake. So they invented a charge of breach of violence restraining order. Now we'll come back to that in a minute, but just on the breach of violence restraining order charge, which the Keystone cops from Perth invented to get entry to Robert Paul CPO's private residence, you might recall back on the 8th of June, Bill Bibbulmun published this.
Our dodgy officer of the week this week is Constable Brad Meachau, spelled M-I-C-H-A-U, formerly from the Kwinana Police, who pulled off a crime at the front door of Robert Paul CPO's house on the 3rd of October 2012. So just take a look at this. Here he is, talking to Robert Paul through the door, claiming to be this person that he's not, looking for help. Then he tries to force entry into the house, and pulls out some documents to serve, doesn't identify himself, then he dumps the documents on the doormat and runs away. And in the police state of Western Australia, apparently that's been served, and it happened to be a restraining order, and which was supposed to be read out. And if you just have a look at that again, you'll see.
So there's the restraining order being served, well, or not being served, would be more to the point. The blockouts on this document are simply to protect Robert Paul CPO from identity theft and nothing else. There's his name, and there, highlighted in red, is the fraud. Failed to appear at a bail undertaking that wasn't entered into by him. So that's the first document of 3. And there you'll see Ingram. We pointed out that officer at the front door there a moment ago. And here's the second page, a statement of material facts. Now, my understanding of a fact is that it's what actually took place and what's true. So this is a total fabrication here by the corrupt WA police, or Waypole trading as WA police. A videotaped interview was conducted with the accused by Ingram, and there's no such videotaped interview in existence for this charge, and never has been. Interview length 35 minutes. Well, that's very interesting, because I don't know whether they're going to find 35 minutes of footage from, because it doesn't actually exist. And here's the charge: breach of bail, failed to appear soon after. And here's another lie: on the 7th of March, the accused appeared in Armadale Magistrate Court and was further remanded on bail by the magistrate. Well, that didn't happen, because on the 7th of March, Robert Paul CPO was kicked out of court, and there was no bail undertakings and no remand. And that's a fact that has now been proved on transcript. And of course then it goes on about the bail undertakings that never took place, and $5,000, and now it gets better. And of course we've got Ingram in again there, and Constable. Well, that's a fraud, because there's no such thing as a constable since the Office of Imperial Police was dissolved, taken over by a corporation. Now here's their so-called WA Police evidence matrix. Now, my understanding of evidence is something that actually is material and actually took place. Well, that's interesting. Okay, and they're trumping it right up here, calling it a serious offence. Yes? Well, still yet to see what the offence was, but anyway. Okay, now these ticks down the right-hand side obviously mean that the officers signing this document have viewed the documents that are nominated here, and it's all above board and honky-dory, but that's far from the truth. Okay, certified copy of bail undertaking from Armadale Magistrates Court, tick. There's no such document. 12th of March, certified copy of bail undertaking, tick. No such document. And here, Robert Paul failed to appear at the Armadale Magistrates Court on 12th of March without reasonable excuse. Tick. Well, I think not knowing about the court hearing might be a reasonable excuse, but apparently not in the fascist state of WA. But it gets better. And in the bottom box here, on the 7th of March 2013, signed a bail undertaking at Armadale Magistrates Court to reappear at Armadale Magistrates Court on the 12th of March 2013. Well, you can't get any clearer than that. The allegation is, or the claim is, that Robert Paul signed a bail undertaking at Armadale Magistrates Court on the 7th of March 2013, and the box is ticked. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, after speaking to Robert Paul and seeing the evidence in court on Thursday, no such document actually exists. This is a total fraud and total forgery. Now here we have presenting officer. Well, it's Brad Meekow of all people. Fancy that, eh? The same guy that committed the crime on the 3rd of October at the same address, posing as a local resident in duress, out of uniform and not showing any identification. Now, interestingly, what transpired at the court hearing on Thursday, the 26th of June 2014, was the police turned up and didn't want to use any of their own documents. They didn't want to use any of this, and they didn't want to call any of their own witnesses. Well, in a most extraordinary set of circumstances, Robert Paul CPO produced the Wapol Corporation's own prosecution documents and had them put on the court file. And I should state too that there were 2 breaches of bail charges. Both of them were fabricated, and the second breach of bail charge was dropped at the start of the proceedings. But they still tried to soldier on with this one, to no avail, of course. Now, when Robert Paul produced their own prosecution documents, some embarrassing situations began to arise, and he also stated to the magistrate, and it was Magistrate Young by this stage, they'd switched courts and switched magistrates for whatever reason, playing past the hot potato or something, advised that Magistrate Young that the police brief actually contained 4 witness statements from 4 different police officers, but they don't appear to be wanting to call any of them. Well, with that, to save a bit of face, the prosecutor, Officer Woon, decided to put none other than Brad Meekow in the witness box. Well, goodness me. Mr. Meekow began by denying he had anything to do with the creation of the prosecution documents. So, rightly, Robert Paul showed him the documents, and he was compelled to admit that it was, in fact, his signature that appeared on the bottom of the prosecution documents as the presenting officer. And Brad Meekow, when was pressed for information regarding the contents of the prosecution documents, such as please produce the signed bail undertaking from the 7th of March 2013, he was stuck for words, to say the very least. He was then asked why he was signing fabricated documents that were clearly when he clearly had not seen the documents that he's claiming that are on there. And again, he was stuck for words. It's an absolute outrage ladies and gentlemen, and the end result, of course, was charge dismissed. But the magistrate gave a long-winded finding about how it must all be Robert Paul's fault because he turned up to court and tried to say his name was Robert Paul. At the end of the day, they had no choice but to dismiss the charge. Now, this is serious fraud by several police officers in the South Metropolitan District of Perth, trying to frame up and shut down a whistleblower. And why are they doing this to this whistleblower? Well, for 20 odd reasons, but certainly a few of them are he's blown the whistle on serious cover-up of child sexual abuse in the former Australian Cadet Service, and people who've got tainted hands in that, such as Senator Eric Betts and others, going on right under the noses of the so-called farcical Child Abuse Royal Commission. He's also blown the whistle on serious corruption in the light rail industry around the country. And of course some of those companies at the moment are rolling into Perth, trying to roll out their overpriced and outdated antique tramway technology to the taxpayers of Perth so they can clog up the roads here and create more road construction and more traffic congestion. And of course the state government don't want anyone running around talking about that, do they? So it's all about, let's shut down Robert Paul quick smart before he gets too much out there. So they're prepared to just come out with anything. It's an absolute disgrace. On page 5, had this to say: ban kids' access to sexual image. And it's all about a report prepared by former Children's Commissioner for WA, Michelle Scott. Now, it's a bit late for a whole generation, and I personally know 2 girls that are suffering severely because of their sexualisation, 2 young girls, and it's certainly all way too late for them. And I know for a fact that Michelle Scott is quite aware of those 2 young girls named Taylor and Amber that have been sexualised by their mother and her belligerent Pacific Island family. And there's been underage pregnancies, underage sex, all sorts of implied pornography and Facebook sites, and the father of those girls has been vilified and victimised for daring to stand up and trying to do something about it, and the argument's been going now for some 8 years. And here we are, 8 years down the track, the same Children's Commissioner who's fully aware of those 2 sexualised girls pretending to be doing something about it. Oh, another disgrace, absolute disgrace. Now, on the 15th of June, we reported that Malcolm Fraser had produced quite a compelling speech to the Big Ideas program on the ABC. I'm sorry to say that since we published that excerpt of Malcolm Fraser pointing to the lack of human rights in our Constitution and the overzealous Anti-Terrorist Act, that whole excerpt has been hacked out of the Big Ideas program, and they're now rerunning the Malcolm Fraser interview with all of that chopped out. Well, only in the fascist state of WA, ladies and gentlemen. So here's the official list of magistrates in the fascist state of Western Australia. And interesting to note, the administrator for the Chief Magistrate Heath, his name is Ingram, the same surname as one of our target police officers. We've always known it's just one big happy family here in Perth. Now, the dodgy public officer of the week this week is Deputy Chief Magistrate Elizabeth Adele Woods, for trashing common law when she refused to have a look at the birth certificate of Robert Paul CPO, proving that his name's Robert Paul, and instead hurled abuse back at him. So that's all we have for this week. Very interesting week it's been. So until next week, I'll be back and on track, and stay safe, stay active, keep up the good fight. I'm Bill Bibbulmun. Goodbye.